For 6 years, they built a shield out of outrage, a narrative so tight, so emotionally charged, that questioning it felt almost forbidden, and now, in a single week, that entire shield is cracking under the weight of its own contradictions, because the same voices that demanded privacy are suddenly surrounded by perfectly timed exposure. And the question no one can ignore anymore is this: was the siege ever real, or was it staged from the very beginning?
Are Prince Harry and Meghan Markle planning on moving their family to Portugal? And I'm like, but can't they be kids in California too? Because nobody is stalking or harassing them.
They live a freakish existence. They're like prisoners.
It becomes freakish. It becomes like a circus act, because these are not candid moments with the kids having fun. They are staged, and the kids, you can almost hear Meghan be like, no, you can't look at the camera. Mummy needs to take this picture for social media.
Meghan Markle couldn't resist publishing evidence of their UK return. She needed to get photographs out there of the Sussexes on British soil.
I thought it was such a low blow, and I just thought, oh my goodness. I mean, they banged on about privacy, and all they do is to continually invade their own.
She is nothing like Diana. She is not compassionate. She is not similar to your mother, Harry, because your mother would have never done the things to her own family that Meghan is doing to her own family. Think about it, Harry. Wake up out of your stupidness and make a reckoning, because your day is coming.
What makes this moment explosive isn't just what happened, it's what doesn't add up. For years, the line never changed, never wavered, never softened. Protect the children, shield them, keep them away from cameras at all costs. That was the moral high ground, the emotional anchor, the entire foundation of public sympathy. And yet suddenly, the same narrative feels rehearsed, because when you look closely, really closely, you start to notice something unsettling. The cameras didn't break through, they were invited in.
It really does come across very hypocritical in my mind for what she publicly says about online privacy, children, like the children's privacy, for example, and then what she continues to do. I'm sorry, but I'm very cynical about it.
And that accusation, that single devastating possibility that the siege wasn't real, that it was constructed, that's not just damaging, it's fatal to the entire story. Because once that idea takes hold, every past claim starts to wobble. Every lawsuit, every speech, every carefully worded interview. If the danger was exaggerated or worse, orchestrated, then what exactly have we all been watching?
They need a real incident to happen, not a fake New York car chase, not a fake fangirl waiting in the hotel toilets. Yeah. They need something that they could use and say, see, look, we're in danger.
Now listen carefully, because this is where the pattern begins to reveal itself. A magazine exclusive appears out of nowhere. Not a leak, not a sighting. An exclusive, detailed, intimate, conveniently timed. A private holiday suddenly becomes public knowledge within days, complete with emotional framing, curated details, and just enough mystery to keep people asking questions. And then comes the next piece, the one that should stop you cold. A supposed paparazzi chase with no photographs, not one.
For a security-conscious couple, Meghan even posted a local restaurant, which is apparently located near where it was rumoured that they purchased a property.
Here's my house! Here's my house, terrorists! Come and visit!
Think about that. A chase intense enough to be reported, dramatic enough to be emphasized, urgent enough to reinforce fear, and yet completely invisible. No long lenses, no blurry shots, no grainy proof. Silence, and in a world where cameras capture everything, where even the most private moments somehow leak, that silence isn't normal. It's suspicious. Because the story we were sold was clear. Relentless press intrusion, endless pursuit, a cycle that had to be broken at all costs. That was the justification. That was the reason behind every move, every decision, every legal battle. But if that pressure suddenly disappears, or worse, if it was never there in the way it was described, then everything changes. And then comes the twist that flips the entire narrative on its head. If the paparazzi didn't capture anything, who did? The answer appears almost immediately. The images didn't come from outside, they came from within. Carefully chosen, carefully released, a controlled glimpse, not an invasion. And that detail, that single shift, changes everything. because it suggests control where chaos was promised. A truly private moment doesn't unfold like this. It doesn't begin with a magazine exclusive and end with a curated photo release. It doesn't present itself in two perfectly timed acts. That's not privacy. That's sequencing. That's strategy. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And suddenly, the questions start stacking up faster than the answers. Why release anything at all if the goal is protection? Why reveal locations, details, glimpses if the threat is as serious as it's been described? Why maintain the language of danger while quietly participating in exposure? Because here's where it gets uncomfortable. If the threat isn't visible, it becomes harder to justify the protection. And if the protection is central to the story, then maintaining the appearance of threat becomes essential. Not proven, not confirmed, but suggested. Implied, repeated, and then another detail slips through almost too casually. A restaurant location shared publicly dangerously close to a rumored residence, not hidden, not vague, specific, and that kind of specificity doesn't align with fear. It aligns with visibility. At this point, it stops feeling like coincidence. One detail, maybe, two, still possible. But three, all pointing in the same direction, all unfolding within the same window of time, that's when coincidence starts to look like design. And just when you think it can't get more complicated, an old story resurfaces. A legal victory, a case built around unauthorized photographs, a clear stance, a strong boundary, proof that unwanted exposure would be challenged and defeated. That history matters because it establishes awareness, understanding, experience, so now the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, the defender of privacy, the one who takes legal action against intrusion. On the other, a version that appears to allow, maybe even encourage, carefully controlled exposure. Both can exist at the same time. One cancels the other out. And this is where the narrative starts to fracture. Because when a brand built on protection begins to mirror the behavior it once condemned, people notice, they question, they connect dots. And once that process begins, it doesn't stop easily. Then comes the backlash. Fast, intense, almost immediate. Reaction spreading, opinions forming, lines being drawn, not slow speculation, but rapid judgment. As if the audience had already been waiting for something like this, as if the pieces were already there, just waiting to click into place. And just when the pattern feels undeniable, the story twists again, not with new claims, but with old echoes resurfacing in ways that feel almost too familiar to ignore. Because this isn't the first time a supposedly private moment has somehow found its way into the public eye, carefully framed, emotionally loaded, and positioned for maximum impact. And that's where the deeper discomfort begins, because it suggests this isn't an isolated incident, it's a method. The same framing, the same rhythm, the same quiet build followed by sudden exposure. A private visits something deeply personal. Something that should exist far from cameras suddenly becomes content. Not criticized for happening, but for being shown, for being shared, for being turned into something consumable. And when that happens repeatedly, the intention starts to matter more than the moment itself, because intention leaves fingerprints even when no one admits to it. And then another layer surfaces, one that complicates the emotional narrative even further. While the public image remains tightly controlled, carefully curated, there are other relationships, real, personal, undeniable, that seem to exist in complete silence. Absence where there should be presence. Distance where there should be connection. And that contrast doesn't just raise questions, it amplifies them. Because if protection is the priority, if family is the core message, then why do some connections vanish entirely while others are selectively highlighted? It creates a tension that doesn't resolve easily. So now, step back and look at the full picture as it stands. A reported chase with no visual proof. A set of images released from within instead of captured from outside. A location revealed with surprising precision. A history of legal action that proves deep awareness of how unauthorized exposure works, and a repeated pattern of private moments becoming public only when it serves a purpose. Individually, each detail could be explained away. Misinterpretation, coincidence, timing, but together they form something harder to dismiss. Not evidence in the traditional sense, but a sequence, a direction, a narrative that seems to be writing itself. And here's the part that keeps pulling people back into the story. There's no definitive proof, no document, no message, no undeniable confirmation that everything was orchestrated. But there doesn't need to be, because in situations like this, it's rarely about a single piece of evidence. It's about consistency, about repetition, about whether the same type of situation keeps unfolding in the same type of way. And right now it does, which is why the reaction hasn't been slow or cautious, it's been immediate, almost instinctive, as if people weren't just reacting to what happened this week, but to everything that led up to it, every previous moment, every previous contradiction, all converging merging into one uncomfortable question that refuses to go away. Is this a coincidence or a strategy? Because if it's a coincidence, then it's an extraordinary one. A series of unrelated events aligning perfectly to create a narrative that feels intentional. But if it's a strategy, then it's something else entirely. Something calculated, something controlled, something designed not just to be seen, but to be believed. And that's where the tension refuses to settle. Because the story hasn't ended, not even close. There's no final statement, no clear resolution, no definitive answer that closes the door on what just unfolded. Instead, there's silence. And in a story like this, silence doesn't calm anything, it amplifies everything. It leaves space for interpretation, for suspicion, for theories that grow stronger the longer they go unaddressed. And maybe that's the most telling detail of all. Because when a narrative is clear, it doesn't need constant reinforcement. It doesn't need to be reshaped, reintroduced, re-explained. It simply exists. But when a narrative starts to shift, when it starts to contradict itself, that's when the real questions begin.